I can talk a little bit about you know, my sort of spiritual awakening. The process actually starts, you know, in infancy, for me at least, and I'm sure for a lot of people. I mean, I remember my first memory of a spiritual experience was when I was still in the cradle, when I was a baby. And I remember that seeing my mother talking to my aunt, and she was concerned about something regarding me. And so they were discussing me, and during the discussion they started walking away from me into another room. And I remember being so curious about what they were saying that I kind of followed them, or my consciousness followed them. And as I was following them, I sort of recall looking down and seeing this child or this baby in the cradle and being utterly shocked and amazed at the fact that, oh my God, is this me? Is this little baby me, or is this consciousness me? So that was my first experience of what we call an out-of-body experience, and it did sort of continue at sort of major points in my life, you know, when I was, I think, around 3 years old and 6 years old and so forth. Later on in life, I remember I used to get these nightmares of being chased. And it was very, very terrifying for a very long time. And then I recall, and I'm not sure if this was an actual person or someone in my dream. I must have been around 11 years old, and they told me that it is possible to awaken in your dream. And if you are able to awaken within the dream and realize that you are dreaming, then you have the power to control the events and outcomes of your dream. And that requires a bit of practice and training, and that is what started happening. So in my dream realm, every time I was being chased, I was being guided on how to run really, really fast, and then to sort of take off and start to fly. And I remember that there was a whole series of dreams in which I actually practiced flying and getting away in my dreams. So again, at a very young age, it was one of those sort of experiences that made me realize that there is more to our experiences than we are led to believe, at least, you know, from our normal environment and the information that we're getting from that environment. I spent most of my life abroad, and I was going to high school abroad as well. And I remember often being the only Muslim person, you know, in these schools. And people had a lot of questions about Islam. And I realized that I could not really plead ignorance. I needed to sort of study for myself, and I needed to have some answers. Started studying the Quran at a very, very young age. Initially, I remember, perhaps it was because of the translation that I was reading. It was Pictor, and it was very scary for me. I saw a God that was, you know, wrathful and would punish people, and was a very, very scary God. So I couldn't really 100% connect. I mean, I did get certain information and I was able to answer certain questions, but I wasn't able to emotionally connect with God. Till many years later, and this is when I was 21 years old, I had gotten married at a very, very young age, at 19, because at that point I was kind of a household name. I had started modeling at a very young age, and somehow had become very, very popular. And what that meant at a very young age was that I had no privacy. So whatever I did or whatever happened became, something that people would gossip about and talk about. And I had to start being very, very careful at a very, very young age. And so kind of realized that I had kind of lost my carefree childhood or young adulthood. And also I felt that I needed some kind of protection. And I thought at that time, which looking back is atrocious, that marriage was a good sort of solution. And in the late 80s, early 90s, people getting married at a very, very young age was not so unusual. So getting married at 19 was considered normal. But of course, by the age of 21, I realized I had made a mistake. And I did want a divorce. And again, divorce in those days was completely, unacceptable. So I decided that I needed to get some guidance on, how to proceed. And this friend of mine, Nusi, arranged for this spiritual retreat where I was able to go to the forests of Changamanga with the Quran and in complete silence study the Quran again to get some guidance, to get some answers. And this time, for some reason, I absolutely connected with God. I saw a lonely God, I saw a loving God, I saw a God who was trying so hard to reach out to human beings over centuries and sort of call them towards Him, and we were so lost in the world and other things that we were just deaf to God, blind to God. And I cried buckets, and I don't know, it's so strange to say, but I really felt that I could feel the pain and loneliness of God. And I came out of that retreat having made up my mind to, yes, go ahead with the divorce, but also to go behind the camera and refuse to be in front of the camera. I realized that I no longer wanted to be a public figure. I needed some time to be away from the spotlight, away from the public eye, to heal, to rediscover myself, and to focus on my career behind the camera. So that was a little bit about my initial experiences with the spiritual. I wouldn't call it awakening, because honestly I feel that my actual spiritual awakening happened much later when I met my Sufi teacher, Sheikh Nazim. This is just to say that for all of us, there are certain experiences that we have, growing up that are kind of setting the stage and preparing us for our sort of spiritual awakenings.